What's going on, everybody? It's Neil from 2AF. Thanks for watching. We're going to do another gun history, gun story video today. Sorry I skipped last month, and even this one was supposed to come out the end of July, and here we are the beginning of August, so sorry for being late. But in any case, hopefully we can make up for it because we've got this cool gun to talk about. So I don't think this gun really had an official name. I think it's kind of unofficially known as the MRE clone or the D-word clone. D-word stands for Delta. Some people don't like to use that word, so they just say D-word, or some combination of those names. This was kind of, there's a lot to talk about with this gun, so this may go over time a little bit, but I will try to be efficient. In any case, this is kind of the beginning of your modern accessorized M4. Now, it's not to say guns didn't have accessories before this, because they did, but this was kind of like the beginning of the road towards what we see now. Prior to this, these guns mostly just had standard plastic handguards, maybe a Knight's Armament M4 RAS, the non-free float 7-inch version. Most guns probably still had your carry handles. Flat tops, I think flat tops came out in like 94 or so, and the time frame of this gun is the late 90s to the very early 2000s. So even flat tops at this time are still pretty new. Even if the gun had a flat top, a lot of time it just had a removable carry handle on there. There was not a ton of optics to be seen at the time. So this is kind of the beginning of, man, let's find some enablers and some accessories that allow us to do more stuff with this gun, and how are we going to put them on there. So the MRE clone is in reference to this rail. This is the Knight's Armament Free Float RAS MRE. Now, the official name for MRE is the Modular Rail Extension. When you would buy this rail, the instructions, that's what it would say on top, Modular Rail Extension. However, probably even more popular than that, MRE came to be known as the more real estate. More real estate because there's just more area to attach accessories on these. To the best of my knowledge, this was like the first time we had a gun with a long free float rail or a long handguard of any type really on a shorter gun, on a carbine. This is a 14.5-inch Colt 6921 upper. So it's just your standard M4 profile. Some of the actual guns may have used SOCOM profile barrels as well, but this one is just your standard M4 profile, 14.5-inch gas system, fixed front sight. This is a C-stamp square, C-stamp square forge Colt upper with one of the older full auto profile heavy C-stamp Colt bull carrier groups. Now I've got mine on, this is you can't even, the Ready Mag, and we'll talk about that in a minute, covers up the logo so you can't even really see what lower this is. But this is a short barrel Noveske Gen 1 lower, and that is because this M4QD flash hider is not pinned and welded on here, so this is an SBR. But let's get back to this rail. So this rail goes on like any of your other Knight's Armament free float rails, right? You've got your, underneath here, you've got your barrel nut. You will torque and time that with this. This will be like a loose collar that's on there as well. Once that's done, you're going to take your rail. There's two pegs that'll go at your 3 and your 6 o'clock. I'm sorry, your 3 and your 9 o'clock. And then the rail will go into that. The back of this rail is threaded to match the threads of this ring. You'll tighten this up. And once that's done, this piece is not on yet. You can see there's 2 screws here and there's 2 screws on the other side. Once these 2 screws come out of each side, this piece that's got the top rail and the bottom rail, this slides off and it comes on and off. So once you have this, because all of this is all part of your rail, once you have this installed, this piece is still off, so you can still slide on your front sight with the gas tube. There's holes in the rail here, so you can punch your cross pins in, and then you've got your gas block installed again. And then once that's done, then this top piece that's got a rail on the top and a rail on the bottom, this will slide in, and you'll screw these 4 fasteners in. Now, it is worthy of note that although this is probably the most common way to see it, there was another version of this filler piece that didn't have any rail on it. So there was no rail at the top or the bottom. It was just a smooth filler piece here. Those were out there. I have seen some, but this is probably the more common way you'd see it. Also worthy of mention, about the same time that this rail was first being developed, there was another rail. It was a green rail, I think, not sure. I think it was from Armalite. Had a very similar locking system here, but it was just like a green, I think, fiberglass tube that also had the cutout for the front sight, and then there was like helicoil or screw threaded holes that were in there, so you can add accessories or rails that would hold accessories. And I think both of those, this rail and that rail, were being fielded at the same time, and I think the go-ahead went to the Knight's Armament rail, and that's why you saw more of these than that green fiberglass 2 rail, which is also pretty cool. In any case, the reason we're doing this is because, man, back then you didn't have mid-length gas guns, at least not in the military. And even in the commercial market, although they did have them, Armalite made some, Rock River Arms made some, probably some others, but those are probably the 2 big ones. It was not a popular or widespread thing at all. It wasn't in the military at all, to the best of my knowledge. Same thing with low-profile gas blocks. Probably next to no guns. I never want to say none, but probably next to no guns would have a low-profile gas block. Everything had this fixed front sight at the carbine length gas system spot. So we needed to make rails to accommodate for that, and that's where this came from. Now, I already mentioned we've got the Knight's Armament M4 QDSS flash presser on here. Moving back from there, we've got the Gangster Grip. Again, I don't think there's an official name for this. I think it just kind of became known as the Gangster Grip. For the most part, I think there's an exception to that, but for the most part, this was kind of just a homemade option that they did in armories. They chopped down a normal A2 grip a little bit and then screwed it into a 1-inch ring that was attached to a Picatinny mount to go on your rail. Now, these had these buttons here. These buttons are attached to these wires. You can see my wires are not attached at all. But these wires are meant to work the PEC 2A that's up here and the flashlight. Now, the 1-inch ring holds either a Surefire 660 weapons light or a 6P handheld light. The difference between those two, to the best of my knowledge, is this is a 660 weapons light in here. So the 660 weapons light had a like a shock buffer bezel, right? So all of these light bulbs that were in here, I don't know if you can see my dog next to me digging holes here. I'm gonna try and get him to stop. Come on, buddy. All of these lights, the 660 weapons light, they had this bezel here that was like a shock absorber, because Surefire, or really anybody who was making weapons lights, they were not using LED lights. These are standard light bulbs in here with like filaments, right? So they're a little fragile. Surefire did a great job at making them about as durable as they can, and part of that was that shock isolated bezel that this has on the 660 weapons lights. If you put the 6P handheld light in there, looks almost the same as this. The biggest difference to my knowledge is those will not have that shock isolated bezel. My dog's crazy. In any case, moving on from there, we mentioned up top we've got our PEC 2A here. This was probably the most common IR laser at that time, and I mean, you can see why people wanted more real estate, wanted a bigger rail, because I mean, this took up the whole entire top of the rail. The area got crowded here pretty quickly as we added stuff. So this is on a LaRue mount right now. I gotta really change it. Otter from Otter Weapon Works got me one of the Knight's Armament mounts for here, which they are not that easy to come by. I did get one from them, I just haven't installed it yet. You know, and that reminds me, there's another thing to talk about with this rail. You may not be able to see it, but this top rail sits up a little higher than the bottom rail. The bottom rail is tucked in a little bit closer. And it wasn't uncommon to see people mount these rails upside down, so that the low rail that's traditionally on the bottom was on the top and your PEC would sit a little bit lower. I have mine installed the traditional way, but that's because I installed this long before I got this PEC 2. I eventually got the PEC 2 and I haven't changed it. Moving back from there, EOTech 551. So the little shorty model that takes the N cell batteries did not have very good battery life. I mean, EOTech doesn't have great battery life to begin with, but this one had even less. It is night vision capable. What else to talk about? Oh, on these risers, to the best of my knowledge, they were to get the EOTech up higher than the PEC. So this wasn't obstructing some of your view. Now, these LaRue risers, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of them, but this one's only about this long. Traditionally, the mount was from here to here, and then it had some more rail coming forward. It wasn't too uncommon to see these with that forward extension chopped off, and that's how I got mine. Now, it is worthy of mention. I wouldn't want to go on without saying this. This riser and this gangster grip, man, I got these from John Knipe at Magpul. Now, I've met him a couple times, but man, we don't know each other very well. But I posted that I was putting this gun together, and he saw the post, and he just went in his pile of stuff and sent me these out of his box of parts. So super grateful for that. That really helped get this all together. Shortly after that is when I got these two parts, is when I got the PEC. I got this from Mike Mers, who at that time was at AAC. In any case, moving on, we've talked about the EOTech 551. We've talked about the LaRue riser. We'll talk about this Knights Armament rear sight. Now, Knights Armament rear sights, I mean, they're not uncommon. You see them all the time. But this particular variant is fairly rare. So I'll kind of bring it in closer. You can see it has the A1 style adjustment knob, right? So traditionally you would see this. This is called the 300 meter backup sight. Unlike the 600 meter backup sight, which is probably a little bit more common, it doesn't have the adjustment wheel here. This is just a sight that comes up. This old one doesn't even have the insert that comes in and out that goes from small aperture to large aperture. This one purely has the small aperture. Don't know if you can see that logo there, but that's one of the really old Knights Armament logos. Man, I got this from a friend of mine, Larry, who shoots with us at FDCC all the time. He came into my job one time and had it, knew I would like it, and just traded me for a regular 600 meter backup iron sight, and that's where I got this from. Standard charging handle on this, because really there was not a whole lot of charging handles back then. You might have seen one that had like a big badger latch or something, but there wasn't a lot of upgraded charging handles back then, hardly any. Colt N1 stock, Lone Star, man, what was this called? The stowaway grip, I think, maybe. Anyway, the Lone Star grip, where it has this tab back here. You push this in, this door hinges down, and there's storage in here. Kind of resembles just a regular A2 grip, but it's a little different, a little fatter in here, and then of course it has a storage. If you are looking for an N1 stock or looking for a Lone Star grip, and you see what they're going for these days, and you are not super stuck on getting the brand name, take a look at B5 Systems. They have been making these for about a year or so, and they just came out with the Lone Star copy very recently. So it's pretty easy to get good looking copies of these for very affordable. And I think this is like $45 or $47 or something, and this is like $19. So way easy to get them now. Standard trigger guard, standard trigger in here, but we do have the Ready Mag. Now the Ready Mag was an accessory that you saw during this time, a little more than you see it now. It's pretty heavy, but it's a good way to keep an extra mag on the gun all the time. Makes the gun a little bulky, makes the gun a little heavy, but a lot of these accessories do. But anyway, press the button, mag comes out, right? Press it, you got your reload right on the gun. Now, this is just basically a piece of steel that goes through the trigger guard, around the front of the mag well, and it kind of clamps together here. There's like a piece of bicycle inner tube they put in here to protect the finish on the lower and kind of give it some bushing. And then there's two screws here. This kind of clamshells together, and then you can screw it together here. There is a, what's the word I'm looking for? There's like, I don't know, nylon or polymer or something bushing right in between here so that you don't crush it. Man, I don't know what else there is to talk about. This is most everything on the gun here. I do shoot this gun still at matches and classes, probably at least a few times a year. And honestly, when I do, I take this off. I find this to be very uncomfortable. I know it's useful for what it did back then, but it doesn't really lend itself to the way that I shoot at all. So I usually just take this off, put another panel down there, and shoot the gun like that. I think that's all I really got for you today. If you head on over to 2af.com, you'll be able to see these B5 parts here. There's not really a lot else on this gun that's really readily available or available at all anymore, unless it's used and pre-owned. But while you're over there at 2af.com, get signed up for email notifications. That's the best way to keep an idea of what's going on around the warehouse, what's coming into the warehouse, what's going on in the going out of the warehouse. If I can help with anything, get in touch with me any way you can. Neil at 2af.com. You can call or text anytime, 904-593-6922, or just comment or send me a message on any of these social media platforms. I will always be happy to help. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for next time.